H1. The Art of Mastery. Deep dive into The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. H2. Introduction. The Secret to World-Class Mastery. What does it take to reach the top 1% of two completely unrelated fields? Most people spend an entire lifetime trying to master a single craft, whether that's playing chess, fighting in martial arts, coding, or writing. But Josh Waitzkin did it twice. By age 16, he was an international chess master, whose childhood inspired the famous book and movie, Searching for Bobby Fischer. Then, in his 20s, he completely shifted gears. He took up Tai Chi Chuan, a traditional martial art, and went on to win the Push Hands World Championship. When people asked him how he pulled off two vastly different achievements, his answer surprised them. He didn't claim to be a genius at chess, nor was he born with elite athletic genetics. His true skill wasn't chess or martial arts. His skill was the art of learning itself. In his book, The Art of Learning, Waitzkin lays out a blueprint for how to internalize complex skills, push past plateaus, and perform under intense pressure. Whether you want to climb the ladder in your career, pick up a new language, or master a sport, this is the ultimate breakdown of how to become a master learner. Entity and incremental mindsets. How you view talent dictates success. Waitzkin begins by addressing the fundamental psychology of growth, drawing heavily on the groundbreaking research of psychologist Carol Dweck. When facing a new challenge, people generally fall into one of two mindsets. The entity mindset. People with an entity mindset believe intelligence, talent, and skill are fixed traits. You're either good at math or you're not. You're either a born athlete or you aren't. When entity-minded people fail, they view it as proof that they lack the necessary innate ability. As a result, they tend to avoid hard challenges because failure feels like a personal flaw. The incremental mindset. With an incremental mindset, believe that ability is malleable. Skill isn't something you are born with. It's something you build through effort, strategy, and deliberate practice. For an incremental learner, failure isn't evidence of weakness. It's simply data showing what needs work. Waitzkin points out that many childhood prodigies fall into the entity trap because adults praise them for being smart rather than for working hard. When these kids eventually hit a wall, they crumble because they don't know how to handle struggle. If you want to master anything, step 1 is to purge entity thinking from your mind. Value effort over ease, and view every setback as feedback. Soft zone versus hard zone. Performing under pressure. Imagine you are in the middle of a high-stakes moment, a job interview, a championship match, or a major presentation. Suddenly, something goes wrong. A distraction occurs, the room gets noisy, or your opponent does something unexpected. How do you react? Waitzkin divides human performance under pressure into two psychological states, the hard zone and the soft zone. Hard zone, rigid, exposed to distraction, snaps under pressure. Soft zone, fluid, flowing with distraction, adapts and thrives. The hard zone. The hard zone demands complete control over the environment. It requires quiet, perfect conditions, and absolute stability. The problem with the hard zone is that it is brittle. The second an external disturbance breaks your perfect conditions, you get irritated, lose focus, and snap under the strain. The soft zone, on the other hand, is flexible and resilient, like a willow tree that bends with the wind rather than snapping like an oak. A performer in the soft zone accepts distractions, absorbs the shock, and flows with whatever happens. Instead of fighting the noise, the soft zone incorporates the noise into the moment. If an opponent plays dirty or the environment becomes chaotic, you don't complain that conditions aren't fair. You adapt immediately. Mastery requires training yourself to stay relaxed and fluid when chaos erupts around you. Investment in loss, giving up your ego to grow. One of the greatest barriers to growth is the human ego. We naturally want to look good, win, and feel competent right now. But Waitzkin argues that real progress requires a principle he calls investment in loss. Investment in loss means deliberately placing yourself in situations where you are likely to lose or look foolish in order to force rapid growth. When Waitzkin transitioned from chess to Tai Chi, he frequently sought out training partners who were much larger, stronger, or more experienced than he was. In the beginning, he was repeatedly thrown around the room. But instead of letting his ego get bruised, he studied why he was losing. By accepting short-term defeat, he accelerated his long-term progress. Most people hit a ceiling because they only practice what they are already good at, or they stick to opponents they can easily beat. To break through plateaus, you must step into uncomfortable territory and be willing to pay the price of temporary failure. Using adversity, turning obstacles into weapons. In high-level performance, injuries, bad calls, and sudden setbacks are inevitable. Most people view these moments as pure misfortune. Waitzkin learned to view them as unique training opportunities. During his martial arts career, Waitzkin broke his right hand shortly before a major championship. Instead of quitting or waiting around to heal, he made a radical choice. He tied his right arm behind his back and spent months sparring using only his left hand. What happened? His left-handed defense and attack mechanics improved dramatically, to a point he never would have reached if his dominant hand were healthy. When his right hand finally healed, he became twice as dangerous because he was fully ambidextrous in his movement. When life hands you a limitation, whether an injury, a budget constraint, or a setback, don't wait for ideal conditions to return. Ask yourself, how can I use this constraint to build a secondary strength I've been neglecting? Making smaller circles, the power of micro-fundamentals. When beginners look at grandmasters or elite athletes, they often see dynamic, lightning-fast moves. They try to imitate those grand gestures, but they end up with a weak foundation. Waitzkin advocates a process called making smaller circles. This means stripping a skill down to its absolute bare minimum fundamental mechanics, mastering them deeply, and then shrinking the physical movement while retaining all the power. When learning chess, most people start by memorizing massive opening setups with all 32 pieces on the board. Waitzkin's coach did the exact opposite. He started Waitzkin with just 2 or 3 pieces on an almost empty board. For instance, a king and a pawn against a king. By removing the noise, Waitzkin gained a deep, intuitive understanding of geometry, space, and piece value. Once those core principles were baked into his subconscious, moving to full board play was seamless. In any field, 1. Break the skill down to its core microcomponents. 2. Master the feel of those fundamentals at a slow, deliberate pace. 3. Gradually compress the movement without losing the depth of insight. Building triggers, how to access peak performance on demand. Can you drop into a state of deep focus and high performance at a moment's notice, or do you have to wait around until inspiration strikes? Waitzkin believes that elite performers don't leave focus to chance. They build physiological and psychological triggers. To build a performance trigger, you create a simple 10 to 15-minute relaxation routine that you run through right before doing something you love or find relaxing. This routine might involve a light physical stretch, a specific breathing pattern or brief meditation, a favorite piece of music, and a healthy snack. Once your brain strongly associates this ritual with a state of calm, focused presence, you shift the routine to right before a high-stress performance, like a big presentation or a match. Eventually, you compress the routine down to just a few seconds, a specific breath or physical cue, allowing you to trigger a flow state on command anywhere, anytime. Slowing down time, chunking, and internalizing information. Have you ever watched a high-level athlete or grandmaster react so fast it looks like magic? They aren't blessed with superhuman reflexes. Instead, their brains process information using a cognitive mechanism known as chunking. When a beginner plays chess, they see 32 individual pieces and have to manually calculate every move. It's overwhelming. But a grandmaster doesn't see 32 isolated pieces. They see recognizable network patterns, chunks of information learned over thousands of hours of study. By breaking skills into micro-fundamentals and repeating them until they become second nature, you free up mental bandwidth. To the outside observer, it looks as though time has slowed down for you, when in reality, your mind is simply processing complex patterns effortlessly. The value of rest, cycling between energy and recovery. In a world obsessed with grind culture, Waitzkin highlights a crucial, often overlooked reality. Sustainable excellence requires mastering recovery. While studying elite performers across various disciplines, Waitzkin noticed a pattern. The difference between good athletes and world-class athletes isn't just how hard they train, but how quickly they recover between high-exertion efforts. Top performers train in intervals. They push themselves to maximum intensity, and then immediately switch their focus to deep physical and mental relaxation. If you remain in a state of constant low-grade stress all day long, your performance edge dulls. But if you train yourself to relax deeply during brief moments of downtime, taking a few deliberate breaths, clearing your mind between tasks, you keep your battery charged for when peak output is actually required. The spiral of learning, depth over breadth. Learning is rarely a straight line. It is a spiral. As you advance in any field, you will frequently return to the basic fundamentals you learned as a beginner. The difference is that each time you loop back, you view those basics from a higher level of mastery and insight. Don't chase novelty at the expense of depth. True mastery doesn't come from knowing 10,000 different techniques. It comes from executing a few foundational principles with profound depth and precision. Conclusion: crafting your own process. The Art of Learning isn't a book about chess, and it isn't a book about martial arts. It's a field guide for self-actualization. To recap the core framework: adopt an incremental mindset. Measure yourself by effort and growth, not static talent. Cultivate a soft zone. Adapt to noise and unpredictable conditions instead of fighting them. Invest in loss. Leave your ego at the door and embrace short-term failures to fuel long-term skill. Master the fundamentals. Build small circles first, compress them, and let your subconscious chunk the patterns. Master recovery. Train in intense bursts, then switch into active recovery to stay sharp. Mastery isn't a destination. It's a lifelong relationship with the learning process. The moment you stop treating failure as an enemy and start treating it as your greatest teacher, you unlock the ability to master any skill you set your mind to.